Hello everybody, welcome back. So this is my quiz. I did a quiz called the Impossible Quiz. I actually got a lot of good players together. I think the first person I tested on this quiz, so I tested people individually on this quiz for a book that I wrote. First person I tested on this quiz was Keith Arkle. It was in a hotel in Yorkshire, halfway between Bradford and Bingley, I believe. It was like it was a sort of quite a nice hotel on a Friday night. We had a meal, and afterwards I showed him this quiz because I remember, sort of like jokingly accusing Keith of cheating on a lot of these quizzes. So I was interested. Like every time I sent him one on Facebook, he'd always seem to get the right answers. So I was interested to see what score he would get when we did the quiz face to face. He actually did pretty well. He did better than everyone else. Actually got two out of 7 if you count this quiz as being out of 7. So that was impressive, but he did not get the answer to this one correctly. So this was the first one. So really this was inspired by like I say, testing people. By the way, that was before the British Rapid Play in 2023, which was won by Amit Gartzi. Well done to Amit for getting the GM title. Years of trying. He probably should have got it before that, but the main thing he's got it now, which is great. He's one of the most talented players in the UK, really. I mean, he's an amazing blitz player. And Jonah Willow in the same tournament got a GM norm as well. So his first GM norm, I believe. Funny enough, I was joking with people that, my YouTube channel is powerful because I did this video where I said I lost to Jonah Willow. And since then, I've scored like 27 out of 29 in FIDE rated games. And Jonah Willow's just got a GM norm. Amit Gartzi's got his title. So it's all coming together for British chess players, which is great. But going back to this position, yeah, really, really tough. So I gave this to a lot of people face to face. Some people I tested online on Skype, and I paid a lot of the people to contribute because I was interested to see what their thought process was in these positions, how you would tackle these really tough positions, maybe the sort of positions you would get on something like Killer Chess Training or something like that, really, really tough. So this is black to play. Now the first thing you think of is the threat is bishop takes h6. Once you start thinking for the position, it took a while for some of the people to realise that was the threat. So you think prophylactically, and you think, well, what is my opponent intending to play? They're intending to sack the bishop. However, there is an amazing defensive resource here. So a lot of people went for queen d7. That looked like a solid move. Knight e4 was suggested. Maybe move the rook so the bishop can drop back to f8 in some variations. None of those really work. Also, I think knight b8 was maybe the move that Keith gave. Knight d7 didn't look good because that just allows the sack anyway. So none of those moves work. I think h5 was number 2 because the point is you basically take the sting out of that. It's not an ideal move to play. But the best move is bishop d8. Now I remember being impressed by this because I was playing like a random training game against a student of mine. And we found this when we were analysing it afterwards that was the top move, and I was like, wow, why is that the top move? It doesn't make any sense to me. The point is that knight can come back to e7 as a defensive resource. So you think, well, this must be winning for white, okay, because you're threatening rook e3 to g3. Looks tremendous for white. Knight e4 is not going to work because I can just wipe you out, bring the rook to e4. Maybe I can even take with a rook possibly as well, might also be powerful. But now you play this amazing defensive move, knight e7. So the point is that after queen f6, a very important point in the variations, that black can now trap the queen with knight f5. And when the queen goes to e5, you go bishop c7, and you have an attack on the queen. The queen can't escape; it has to go back, otherwise you lose the queen. And bishop d8. So an amazing defensive idea. And the ironic thing about it is, if the rook wasn't on e2, if it was on e1, then it wouldn't. This whole variation wouldn't work for black because the rook, the queen could go back to e2 here. But okay, so well done at home if you found bishop d8. I think nobody found bishop d8 when I tested it. Let's move on to the second one. Now, this one was very tough. This was from a possible variation from this Dingler and Nepomniachtchi match. The Ding ended up winning. But I believe this was a game, the second game of the match, where he actually lost the game with white. So it just goes to show, even if you lose, you can bounce back. Now again, my assorted panel, I think my highest rated player was Richard Pert. Keith is up there, obviously, as well. I believe Richard Pert had a slightly higher FIDE rating at the time. There was also an Indian player who took part, it was like 2390. He went through his answers very, very quickly. However, unfortunately, he didn't get any correct because it's so difficult to quiz. The quiz is so difficult. I'd be interested to see how, like, a Ding would fare on this quiz, or a Nepomniachtchi. This is white to play. Now, somebody in the comments did give the correct answer. However, you know, I'm not convinced they wasn't using an engine, because I think this is almost impossible to find without an engine. Now, this person might claim that they weren't, but you believe them. I don't. I don't believe anybody. I don't trust anyone. I don't even trust myself. Certainly don't trust myself. But white's are playing this position very, very tough. So the thing is, what you're thinking here about this position, it looks uncomfortable for white, right? The rook on g7 is creating pressure down the g file. The bishop on b7 is creating pressure down here. That's strategically unpleasant for white. However, the black king is a little bit weak. So one of the moves that the panel suggested was e4, and I think that was pretty close to being the top move. Pretty much the same as the move I played again. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a cheat, my quiz, really, and it's kind of maybe a bit pointless, because although I'm looking for perfection, in reality, a practical move like e4 would probably score just as well, if not better, than the move that the engine says is the top move. So the top move here is king h1. Now the point is that you're kind of moving out of the way of the rook on g7, but you also looks like your rook running to bishop. So I think a lot of people just couldn't get to king h1. I think there were one or two in my panel who kind of sort of toyed with it, but they kind of dismissed it. And the Indian guy that did the quiz, he actually said it was similar to a line that you get in a dragon, where white castles queenside and eventually goes king a1, so you have a rook b1 defensive resource. I think there's a very important understanding level that at some point you go rook g1. So if you pick up all this little bit of knowledge along the way in chess, it makes a massive difference. Now, even if you had that knowledge, you might not get to king h1, because it's just a very tough move to find. I mean, the first thing you think of is, why can't black just take here, for example? I believe then that white, yeah, as she goes here and then is quickly going to activate the bishop and get the rook to the c file, actually maybe even favours white. So the top move was king h1. Very, very tough to find. Nobody in my panel found that. Again, I'd say maybe some of you at home found it. If you did, would find it without an engine. Well played. If you claimed that you found it without an engine, but you were using an engine, keep deluding yourself. You know, we can all. Anyway, let's move on to number 3 before we get into any arguments, right? So this again was a very tough one. So bear in mind, nobody in my panel, and I think I did about maybe 10 people, got maybe not quite that many, maybe 8. I think it was Anarai, Sain Bayar, Zoe Varney, the Indian guy whose name I can't remember. Tristan Cox did it. Richard Pert, Keith Arkle, Jack Rudd, and also Jonathan Blackburn. I don't know if there's anyone else. None of those got the first 2. So it just goes to show how difficult. This is the first one where somebody got the right answer, and it was Keith. And the correct answer here, he said, like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time over it. So he spent ages on the first 2. And he was like, I'm not going to spend, which shows the value of intuition, actually. He said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time over this, and I'm just going to say F4 was the best move. And he was correct. And that was the move played in the game by Yasser Serai. Now, why is F4 a good move? I think it's a good move from a positional point of view. Keith's a good positional player. Obviously, Serai is as well. It basically controls this square. So white wants to develop the knight to F3. But not allow. So if you go knight f3 immediately, it's not a terrible move, of course. you're not got quite as much control over e5. So, I mean, a lot of people suggested, lots of ideas suggested, people went in for moves, like even bishop e4 was debated, but that was not a good suggestion. E4 was a move that was mooted, but I might run into knight takes e4, so that's a bad move. Bishop c2 I think was suggested, but f4 is actually the best move. Knight is coming to f3. I believe this game was played in 1983 in Nick 6 or something like that, and it would have been quite close to the end of Tigran Petrosian's life. So obviously Tigran Petrosian was a world chess champion during the 1960s. I believe that he lost. Did he lose to Botvinnik maybe in his first attempt to win the world title, and then won the second attempt? Because I think he was world champion for something like 63 to 69. But it's possible he defended the title in the middle, a period against Spassky, and then lost it in 69 in the rematch. I think that's what happened. But obviously he died in 1984, so I don't know whether he was ill by this point. He knew he was ill. I believe he died of stomach cancer, so that was tragic. He died quite young, he would have been in his 50s. But one of the greatest world champions, a very, very strong defensive player. I think Kasparov had a lot of problems with Petrosian in the early part of his career because of how resilient Petrosian was defensively. Kasparov would go through opponents like butter. Yasser Seirawan is a famous chess commentator and player. His family, I believe, is from somewhere like Syria, maybe? Or somewhere like that. Or maybe I'm getting mixed up with Steve Jobs. Maybe they were both. Their families from Syria, or there's some kind of like Middle Eastern sort of heritage. But f4 was the best move, and you go knight f3 and knight e5. So the next position we look at is from that same game, and this was actually a position where nobody got it right. So the only one who got it right in my panel, the last one, was Keith. In this next position, nobody got it right in my panel. Now somebody in the comments suggested a move, rook takes d7, which actually is a good suggestion. Actually, the interesting thing is not the best move according to the engine, though. Interestingly enough, the interesting thing is when I've read this is where the game was taken from. That I found this game was in Chess Duels by Yasser Seirawan, and he mentions that rook takes d7 is the best choice, and says that rook takes d7 would have led to a winning position. However, the engine doesn't quite agree with this. So what you can do is you can take with a knight, queen takes, and now you have to move the rook. Otherwise you're going to lose the rook. So obviously at the moment it looks really tremendous compensation for what it is actually, because the bishop's cutting off the black king. However, black then goes white goes e5. Maybe rook b1 was also possible. But now you have to give up a pawn to really get your king into safety. So the computer says f6. This has all been engine checked. And white is better here, but the game is sort of continuing. There's some variation like this, and the engine says that white is better, maybe winning on a higher depth. So, I mean, that was probably just as good as the suggestion that I gave eventually, in reality, certainly in a practical sense. So well done if you found rook d7. That was what most of my panel went for, actually. So it's kind of a bit of a silly puzzle in a way, because the move... But I just found it interesting that when you checked... when I checked with the engine, it actually preferred a move over rook d7. So the move that Seirawan playing the game was actually a big mistake, bishop a4. And I think this stems from trying to understand a position. How much time do you need to understand a position? Bishop a4 was a really bad mistake, which he kind of alluded to in his commentary, because it allows black to just escape and get a very, very sedate position. Black just castled, and then he offered a draw. Petrosian. Seirawan realised he'd gone wrong, realised he lost his advantage, decided to agree to a draw. However, you go back, there's actually a very interesting move here that white can play, which is simply to take the knight on e5. Now, first, thing you think of, well, if I take with a queen, that's probably going to be bad because that's going to run into, I believe bishop a4 is very strong actually. Is that right? No, queen e3, sorry. Queen e3 is strongest. Because you're threatening bishop a4. I think if you go bishop a4, they can probably take and go take on c3. No, bishop a4, queen g5 is stupid, right? So queen e3. Again, tough to see that this is so strong. Queen e6. So going back to this position, I think 95 is bad because of bishop a4 check. This is the point. And there's no comfortable way to block the check, because if you go, it's kind of like what Serowan was trying to do with bishop a4, but a better version. Because now the king will have to move. So king goes to f8. And I think that white is doing very well here. I'm not sure exactly what white plays. Maybe bishop f4 is a move. Maybe even you could start thinking about moves over d5. This looks really tremendous for white. So the critical move is to take with the queen because that hits the bishop. And a lot of people got to this but then rejected it because they think, well, I'm exchanging queens. Bishop a4 doesn't work because the bishop's hanging with check. So this feels like black surviving. If you take, I'm taking, I'm fairly comfortable. There's nothing to see there, so you move on. However, this shows why it's so important to not give up on variations quickly. If you look a little bit deeper, queen e3 is tremendous. Right? The rook is hitting the knight. So you can't castle. So you have to go queen e6. Again, it looks okay for black. Queen e6, you're defending the knight and ready to castle. First sight it looks okay, but now we see the genius of the computer's conception. It goes bishop f4, castles. Now it goes rook d6. And now tremendous move again, e5, and it really sets the seal on really what white's strategy is. It's about domination. So now there's all these threats like queen g3, bishop 8 followed by bishop h6, pawn h7 could be a target, queen d3 is already a threat. The computer says that white's already winning. With this very simple variation, always look, guys, always look for captures and checks. So look for the capture. Calculate it. It might not be the correct move, it might not be the correct move to capture, but you should always calculate the capture. The simple capture. But a lot of people gave up on this, and I think this also comes down to visualization as well. If you can visualize 7 or 8 moves in front and get to that position, a lot of people just can't visualize that far ahead. So how many moves is that? When we took on e5, that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves. We've got 5 moves in front. We had to visualize 5 moves in front. We got to a position which was tremendous for white. But a lot of people would get stuck and wouldn't bother to try and visualize that many moves in front. Even 5 moves. Even 5 moves is tough, right? So anyway, so that was a tough one. Nobody in my panel got that. Well done if you got knight takes e5 at home. Let's move on to the next puzzle. So this is an interesting one as well. This is white to play, black to play. So it was a 2-part puzzle, and quite a few of the panel that I did actually got this one right. But I was 2-part puzzle. What should black play, and what is the evaluation? So the best move for black in this position, well, a lot of people actually went for moves like c5 was kind of a normal looking move. e5 was given as an possible alternative. I'm not sure there was much else actually. Maybe h3 was maybe a possible. You're looking over on that king side. The g4 is very strong. I think Keith got this right, and I think it basically is based on his kind of Nimzo-Indian knowledge. Sometimes you just throw all your pawns forward, and you just basically try and expose the black king. So I think the main idea is that if they go f4 now, one of the main ideas is that e5 is now much more powerful. I think you can also throw in a g3 sometimes as well. Basically, I think it's e5. What does it notes say? Yeah, e5 is tremendously powerful. It's more powerful now because I'm now threatening to take. Whereas, I think if I go to e5 immediately, not quite so strong. Because e4 only kind of blocking me a little bit. Still good for black probably. But this is a good test of people's intuition, their attacking sense. G4, just crudely attacking, and in E5 and black is a lot better. Don't think actually many people got the evaluation right. I think the only person who got the evaluation right from memory was Zoe Varney. Nick Skell was another person who did the quiz. And he got G4 as well. I think Richard Pert also got G4. And maybe one or two others got G4. So, well done. I think somebody in the comments maybe got G4 as well. Although the same person got King H1 right, so I'm a little bit sceptical. Anyway. As I say, well done for taking the quiz. But one thing I would say, a lot of people look at this quiz as this is a stupid quiz. And it probably is. I mean, it's just a bit of fun. I just like the idea of testing people to max and trying to really test people and really give them really tough quizzes. When I've done Chessable courses before, people often complain and they say, oh, your quiz is so tough, I can't do that. I kind of understand where they're coming from. I mean, I must admit, I was reading this Ramesh book. I didn't particularly like it because I just found it too tough sometimes. They were saying, do this puzzle. I can't be bothered. But when I did the puzzles myself, I set them myself, it somehow seems more relevant, but obviously it isn't. Anyway, I'm kind of waffling a little bit in an incomprehensible way. But yeah, so basically I just kind of like positions that really stretch people to maximum. They've got to find these really, really tough moves. Because I think, so you can complain about it being too tough, but at the end of the day, chess is a really tough game. And you're going to get really, really complex positions, whatever level you play at. You can't escape from them. So you have to really sort of have a feel. And I think there is some kind of logic to this idea of going G4 anyway. It's kind of not as difficult as some of the other puzzles. Okay, so then we move on. So that was another game, Boris Spassky. Yeah, Yasser Seirawan. Boris Spassky was obviously a former world chess champion. Very famous player. I actually played Boris Spassky over the board. It was a draw in the French league in the kind of early 2000s. By that stage of his career, I believe Spassky was kind of like a player who would take a lot of quick draws. He'd often want to go and play tennis. I think it was a story about Ulf Andersson and Boris Spassky turning up in their tennis. Before they agreed to a quick draw with each other, they'd turn up in their tennis sort of like costumes and sort of like clothes, and then went out and played tennis immediately afterwards. I think Nigel Short was mentioning this in one of his books and kind of sort of frowning on this kind of behaviour. But yeah, he's a very entertaining character, Spassky, in many ways, very powerful character. And obviously he had a great career, He's still alive now, so he's probably the longest surviving world chess champion. Was born around about, I think he survived the siege of Leningrad, so would have been born maybe 1930s, late 1930s, maybe Spassky. By the time he played Fischer in 1972, the next player we're going to move on to is Bobby Fischer. By the time he played Fischer in 72, I believe Spassky would have been in his mid-30s, so 72... So yeah, maybe he was born in like mid-1930s, Spassky. Which would make him late 80s now. If he was born 35, I believe when he played Fischer in 72, he was like mid-30s. So maybe he was born 37, something like that, yeah? 37 would make sense. So now he would be, like mid to late 80s. Bobby Fischer was obviously one of the best players of all time. He famously played Boris Spassky in that 72 match. In this game he's up against Vladimir Takmakov. It was one of Fischer's wins from sort of famous period where he's famously dominant, winning every game and dominating players. I do think, it was my experience recently, I've been winning a lot of games. I do think chess is a lot to do with playing a lot, and Fischer was playing a lot at that time, and obviously confidence. Now I can't compare myself to Bobby Fischer obviously, but I do think it is, those are the key. If you can get that right, if you can play enough, get that confidence from playing a lot, you start to win a few games, you start to play a lot better, and you do the analysis as well, then you start to see your results improving. But this one was really tough. So I found this from a Jan Timman book. And in the game, I believe that nobody got this one right from my panel. I think Keith went for Queen D3, kind of expected, because he likes to exchange queens. Not a bad choice, but not the best move. It's a tough one because it's not clear that white is better on the queen side. So where do you play? You know, F4 is too weak. It is an idea. At the moment, white's position is like a coiled spring. Like typically in his English, I remember she was analysing a game that I had years ago against Stuart Conquest, where he was shuffling around on the back rank, a little bit like what Bobby Fischer's doing here, but then eventually his position sprung out and he won the game. I blundered. Couldn't handle the pressure. It was a changed situation. And this is a little bit similar, kind of similar parameters. You kind of got, I believe it might have even actually originated from a 1b3 variation. But yeah, Jan Timman mentioned the best move is actually Bishop G4, so well done if you found Bishop G4. Very tough move to find. Now, what is the point of Bishop G4? Well, it's really to induce this move F5. So F5 looks like a move that black wants to play, but now you go back and it turns out the black position is a little bit more vulnerable with this move F5 thrown in, and it hasn't really helped their situation. It's kind of taken the pressure off D3. Very, very tough to find. I mean, if Bobby Fischer was around now and somebody said to him Bishop G4 was the best move according to the engine, he'd probably still go Bishop F3. You know, it's just as good a move practically speaking. But Bishop G4, I think that some people did go for Bishop F3. I think, for example, Zoe Varney maybe went for Bishop F3. So after F5, what is my analysis? It gives Bishop F3, Knight F6, then Knight E2. So clearly you can see why I induced, if I went Knight E2 in that position with a pawn on F7, the Bishop D3 would just win for black. But now, if you go F4, what am I playing actually after F4? Shows I'm lost without the engine. I think maybe white has a few good choices, but possible that just simply going E4 is possible. But I guess you defend this go, right? Do you go Knight C4 or maybe Knight B3 or something? What does the engine say? Knight C4 is the move, yeah. Yeah, so the point is that the black position looks really powerful, but it's a little bit overextended. I mean, the engine doesn't really give much advantage for white anyway. I mean, after the move Bishop F3, it slightly prefers Bishop G4, but Bishop F3 is more or less the same. So again, you might look at this, what a stupid quiz, because there's no difference. And that's why I was saying that, like, I think even for a super GM, they would struggle to get these answers right, because if the difference is between 0.2 of an evaluation, 0.2 of a pawn, even for a super GM, they're going to struggle to get there really. And Bishop F3 looks just as intuitive as Bishop G4. But anyway, I just like the idea that you had to find the top move. So, again, thanks for taking part in my quiz. If you did take part in my quiz, it was a tough quiz and I enjoyed setting it. But yeah, it cost me a lot of money because I think I spent something like 600 quid paying people, because I thought, well, they're chess players, they should be paid. But I kind of regretted it really, because I didn't get any extra from the book. I did get an advance for the book, but I never got like a massive advance. I think it was something like 2,000, 3,000 euros, and I'll probably never see any royalties from the book. Now, part of the problem is it's published on the Informant website. I'm not having to dig at Informant or anything, but they don't seem to advertise anywhere other than like in-house. So possibly you would get more sales with other publishing companies. I don't know. So it's tough to get big sales with some of these publishing companies. Some of my recent books sold very poorly. I think one of the books I'd sold only sold something like 550 copies, so you're never going to see any royalties from that. part of the problem is that the global recession, the war in Ukraine has affected the global economy. The other problem is that I mean, the other issue is that obviously sites like Chessable have become very popular, so people are kind of moving away from chess books. The other issue is that the whole chess book thing has become very saturated. If you're not a big name, it's tough to hit big sales. Now, I got lucky with one of my books, Making the Castle King, partly through it got published with Quality Chess. They didn't turn it into a Chessable course. It got translated into Chinese, so I made reasonable money from that. Every book I wrote, I got the same sort of money that I got from that. I probably made over £10,000 from that one book. Then it would be worthwhile writing chess books. But to be honest with you, I'm actually currently writing a chess book at the moment, but I'm kind of thinking this might be my last book, because you don't get a lot of money for it. It's a hard slog. You're talking about many weeks of writing. Now, I remember once chatting to Joe Gallagher, and he was talking about a book that he wrote. I think it was Anti-Sicilians, and he said he basically wrote it in like a week, but he was doing 10-hour days. And actually, it was harder back then to write chess books because you didn't have the internet wasn't such a big thing, so you kind of you had to go a lot on your own resources. Chess based. Maybe he had chess based. I can't remember, but I think in general to write a chess book, you probably need like 3 months of your year, and if you're only going to get three grand from it, and it's a kind of like a full-time project, then it's not a great reward. If you're seeing royalties, then I think it's worthwhile. If you're seeing, say, 2 grand royalties for the next 5 years, then it's worthwhile doing. But I feel like with the whole chess publishing, firstly, I become jaded by writing chess books. I feel like I'm repeating this myself over and over again. And secondly, it just doesn't pay very well. So it's not easy to do video courses either. I find video courses are a long slog as well. Don't get me wrong, I quite enjoy doing stuff like Chessable courses, but it's a lot of hard work. And they expect you to produce a proper product, which they should do, of course. So it's a tough ask, and you feel like I'm not getting a huge amount of money for a lot of these things. Am I going to get, life-changing money? I mean, all the books I've written are basically, it's not changed my life. I'm still in the same situation. That money has been spent. Where do you go from there? So anyway, that's really my... please buy the book if you can find the book online. But yeah, that's really my experience of setting these impossible quizzes. I don't know if I'll do many more, but watch out for any kind of publications I do in the future, because I do think I put a lot of effort into my books. They're not terrible books. They're quite decent chess books. I think I've got reasonable reviews online for a lot of my books. I think one of the best writers actually was Jonathan Rowson. I mean, he did a book called Chess for Zebras, and The 7 Deadly Sins is probably his best one, which is a really good book. And I'm not sure if I've written a book on that level, but I've done a number of reasonable kind of chess books. I mean, probably my best book actually was A Year in the Chess World, in terms of pure, literary, and how honest it was. I think that was a very good book. I think Pandemic Shot was quite good as well, and obviously Making the Castle King from a purely chess aspect was probably my best book. Anyway, let me know what you think about the video. Did you find that a complete waste of time? You probably did. I completely understand. Please leave your comments below and please subscribe.